the tomb that waited 3,500 years. Thutmose II was the first pharaoh's resting place discovered in Egypt since Tutankhamun in 1922, over a century between two of history's greatest finds. Tonight we walk into a narrow desert valley west of Luxor, and into a mystery that took nearly 3 years to solve, because when the archaeologists finally stepped inside this tomb, they found almost nothing. No golden mask, no glittering treasure, no king at all. Just a plastered corridor, a ceiling that had fallen in, and a silence that had held for 3,500 years. The air inside was cool and close, thick with limestone dust. Their lamps found faint blue paint clinging to one wall, and little else. It should have been the crowning discovery of a lifetime. Instead, it was an empty room. And yet this empty room would rewrite what we thought we knew about the last lost pharaoh of Egypt's greatest dynasty. The question hangs there in the dark, patient and simple. If this was a king's tomb, then where exactly did the king go? Let the world fade in around us. Roll the centuries back to around 1479 before our era. Down along the Nile, the city of Thebes is settling into evening. You can smell river mud and wood smoke, the tang of drying fish on the quays, warm bread cooling on mud brick sills. Oil lamps flicker to life behind reed screens, one window at a time. Cattle low somewhere near the water. A boat creaks against its mooring. On the west bank, the sun slips behind the cliffs, and for one long moment, the whole necropolis glows amber before the dark comes in. This is the heart of the 18th dynasty, the age when Egypt stands at the very height of its power. Its armies reach into distant lands. Its temples rise in white stone and gold, and somewhere up in these quiet hills, the tomb builders have just finished a resting place for their young king. The paint is barely dry. Step closer to the man himself. His name is Thutmose II. He is the son of Thutmose I and a lesser wife named Mutnofret. He marries his own half-sister, Hatshepsut, as royal custom demanded, and together they hold the throne of Egypt. His reign is short. The evidence suggests only a handful of years. Most historians believe he died young, sometime around 1479 before our era. History barely gets to hear his voice. He leaves few monuments, fewer stories. Many scholars think Hatshepsut held much of the real power while he sat beside her. We cannot be certain. The record is thin and debated to this day. But one thing is not in doubt. When he died, Hatshepsut did something almost unheard of. She took the crown for herself. She had herself crowned pharaoh, ruling as a king in her own right. She became one of the very few women ever to hold that title in 3,000 years of Egyptian history. On his monuments, she would later carve her own name over his. His face quietly began to fade from the record even before the sand could bury his tomb. Geography made all of this possible. Each summer the Nile floods, then draws back, leaving behind black silt so rich that the same fields feed the same families for 1,000 years. That steady, reliable abundance is what builds temples and armies and tombs. But the kings of this dynasty made a careful choice. They stopped flaunting their burials. Gone were the great pyramids of earlier ages. Those enormous stone arrows had done nothing but point robbers straight to the treasure. Instead, these kings carved deep into the desert cliffs, into hidden valleys, far from the river. They let the mountain itself stand guard. Secrecy was the new defense. Thutmose II's tomb sits about 2.5 kilometers west of the famous Valley of the Kings. It is tucked into a remote wadi called Gabanat el Kurud, a place chosen precisely because no one was ever meant to find it. For thousands of years, no one did. Not even a whisper of the young king rose from the rock to give it away. For generations, Egyptologists knew this king had to have a tomb somewhere. It was the one missing piece, the last undiscovered royal tomb of the entire 18th dynasty. Every other king of that golden line had been accounted for, one by one. Only Thutmose II's original resting place stayed hidden, a blank space on the map that no one could fill. Then came October of 2022. A joint Egyptian and British team was working the western wadis, clearing rubble, searching for foundation deposits. Routine work, slow work, and then someone noticed something odd underfoot. A softness in the ground where there should have been hard rock. They began to dig, and out of the debris emerged a doorway. Behind it, a plastered passage, sloping gently down into the dark. Their first thought was not a king at all. Given where it sat, they were almost certain this tomb belonged to a queen, a door no living eye had seen since the age of the pharaohs. And the deeper they looked, the more the sand had to say. And here is where the story turns. Why a queen? Because this tomb sits close to the burials of the wives of Thutmose III, and near the very spot where Hatshepsut herself had once meant to rest before she became king. Everything about its location whispered queen, not pharaoh. So for nearly 3 years, the team dug and doubted and dug again. Then at last, the ground gave up its proof. Fragments of alabaster jars inscribed with a single name, Thutmose II, and beside it a phrase that changed everything, the deceased king. Right next to his, another name, Hatshepsut, the woman who had buried him. This was no queen's tomb. This was the missing pharaoh, the last lost king of the dynasty, found at last. And yet the deeper they pushed into the passage, the stranger it became. Because for all the proof of who owned this tomb, the king himself was nowhere inside it. Look up, and you can almost see what once was. The ceiling of the burial chamber had been painted a deep, endless blue. Scattered across it, yellow 5-pointed stars. A night sky carried underground so the dead king could sail among them forever. Down the walls ran passages of the Amduat. That is the funerary text that guides a dead pharaoh through the 12 hours of the night, hour by hour, until he rises again with the morning sun. The team gathered the fallen plaster, blue and gold, from the rubble. Piece by piece, they fitted the fragments back together like a shattered heaven. And they noticed something. The design was strikingly simple, elegant, restrained. Piers Litherland, the British director of the dig, believes this very tomb may have been the prototype, the quiet model that later royal tombs would copy, including, generations down the line, a tomb we all know by heart, the tomb of Tutankhamun himself, a tomb that shaped the most famous burial in the world, hiding all this time under our feet. The few objects left behind whisper of a lost fortune, fragments of fine alabaster vessels, thin as eggshell, a wooden staff carved with the king's own cartouche, and a walking stick that modern science has now studied closely. It was made of African blackwood. The Egyptians called it Pharaoh's ebony, a dark, dense timber carried all the way up the river from lands far to the south. Rare, costly, reserved for the highest and richest hands in the kingdom. Nothing here was ordinary. Every splinter, every shard, points to a burial that may once have rivaled the treasures we still line up to see in Tutankhamun's gold. The wealth was here, the devotion was here, the whole ceremony of a king sent into eternity. So hold that picture in your mind, a young pharaoh sealed in his painted tomb, surrounded by everything he would need forever. And then imagine the moment, only a few years later, when the water came, and no one alive knew it was coming. This is the flaw in the mountain's promise. In the desert, rain is rare. Months pass, years pass, and not a drop falls. But when it does come, it comes without mercy. In minutes, these dry wadis turn into rivers. Brown water, roaring downhill, carrying rock and sand. And the evidence is written into the tomb itself. Not long after the king was sealed away, a flood tore through the valley. It poured straight down the sloping corridor into the dark. Water and debris filled the passage. Over time, that debris packed down and set hard, almost like concrete, the archaeologists say. The soaked ceilings began to weaken, the plaster loosened. And then, deep underground, with no living soul to hear it, the roof of a pharaoh's tomb began to come down, slab by slab, onto the very chamber where a king had been laid to rest for eternity. Eternity had lasted only a few short years. So the priests made a choice. We know from other royal tombs that this happened again and again across ancient Egypt. Floods, robbers, slow decay. And again, the guardians of the dead refused to abandon their kings. Here, one clever detail may have saved almost everything. The burial chamber sat about 1.5 meters higher than the corridor floor. A single step up, cut into the rock. That small rise likely lifted the king and his treasures above the worst of the floodwater, just enough, just long enough to be rescued. So picture them, working in that ruined dark by lamplight, clearing debris, reaching the chamber, lifting the king out of the wreck of his own tomb, his body, his grave goods. Everything they could carry back up the flooded passage and into the night air. They did not leave him to the mountain. They took him somewhere new, somewhere they hoped would finally be safe. Picture the journey. A body, wrapped and bound, carried out beneath a desert moon. Along the pale cliff paths of the West Bank, the only sound the wind and footsteps on stone. In the centuries that followed, the priests of Amun did this over and over. They gathered their endangered kings, one by one, and hid them together, far from the looted tombs that had failed to protect them. Thutmose II was moved once, and then, it seems, moved again. Somewhere in the folded hills near Deir el-Bahari, the priests found a deep, hidden shaft in the rock. And there they sealed their kings away, not one ruler, but many. Dozens of Egypt's greatest names resting side by side in the dark. Kings who had never known each other in life, lying together in death. And above them, the desert kept its secret. For nearly 3,000 years, the world walked past that cliff and never knew what it held. And so the priests kept their promise, moon after moon, until the very land forgot he was there. The secret held until 1881. In the cliffs at Deir el-Bahari, that hidden royal cache was finally opened. And out of the darkness came coffin after coffin, the most famous names in all of Egyptian history. Thutmose I, Seti I, the great Ramesses II himself, and among them a mummy long believed to be Thutmose II. For over a century that was the answer. Case closed. But here the story keeps one last, quiet question. Some scholars now doubt that body is truly his. The remains seem to belong to a man of around 30. Yet this king likely died much younger, in his late teens or early 20s. The dates do not sit easily together, so the search may not be over at all. His tomb has been found. His mummy, perhaps, has not. A tomb can wait 3,500 years to be found and still refuse to give up its king. So the tomb waited 3,500 years. And when we finally opened it, the king had already slipped away. An empty room that told the loudest story of all. Not of gold, but of devotion. Of guardians who carried their king through a flood, into the night, again and again, so the mountain would not have him. The valley is dark now. The lamps are out. The dust is settling back onto the stone. And somewhere in these silent hills, a pharaoh may still be resting, patient as the rock around him, still waiting to be found.